Ya mua lava ona si ele vi inga ma avane le fafatai le tapa o le langi. Mo le ne ava no matungo fia tara no aisi tasi uso le awo lawi loa ana ta le ni mana fa so I Samoa ya ma le lalulangi atoa. O te fatu lo atu fo I pa ia ma mamalu ma urulunga o Samoa. Ile a mata mai mata sawa se ia pa ia le fau sawalii ma le lua loto fili ma pulutu. Pa ia o tumu ma pule I tuau ma ala tawa. A inga malato tama foi malato a inga le tai ma va al fonti tu rona le fare anga fulu po fo ma tu langi sa ole ma le lau ni usai lo ma sa le au mua so ma le vai fanua I tu au ma la tawa ma le mamalo tama matua le motu tai ma e a fionga ile na auna amotasi alo le manu atele ma ali I fatui ya ma to le fale ula pa io o Samoa ele popo a o se ala o. O le anu unu atu fa atini o tau sala, ma fa ata a lolo I mamalo o tu mumapule, a ware la to fatua inga tau si lea tu lau. A o le nei awa noa matungo whiwa maua ia te au le hanga whaftai. A wao lewa tato whewai, ma ngawhi tau soi fua e peo le whetalainga I le o tonga I paitea. Ma o te tali tonu e leo lau maua e aso whapene. A wa o te tali tonu o le atua le tama e whaasino ala mo tamu whanau tamu whai. Ma o lea o te fia whaftai atu e rau sunga misa, mai le awhionga, mai le awhionga lea o tanga, ma upu ia pala au. A whio mai le awhionga o le matua upu I ma upu ia sa, le ainga sa to I lolo. A whio le sao tau lau papa ma whanua li. Ma liu mai tau talanga whai umu, ma le ala tai mai o le whariwha ma whengata. Tainane le whetalenga o tamala ma mamalu, ia sa le murianga ma whale upolo o tō whina. Ia pa ia lava lea o lea tātou whaafafonga I ai lea so. Ini whaafosoa matungo fia mai le uso lea ia misa, Paul J. Apui, po le susunga ia that guy. Samoa usi mai le whaafafonga. So I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody who's listening today. Thank you very, very much to Paul for considering us for this interview. Like I gotta say, from the beginning, I'm a huge fan. I don't know if you guys can see that, but this is my RSA CD from back in the day. I want to say when I was about 15 years old when it came out. And that's where I first recognized you. So that guy title that you have is very, very, it fits you well. Because as soon as people see you in the other things that you've done, hey, that's what come up for RSA. So that's where I originally recognized you from, was from this CD. And because even on the back of it, it's got your name on here. And in fact, it calls you, you got another name in here. It says Paul the Cat. Was that a previous name that you used to use?
I used to work for Magic FM back home. And so Black Cat was my radio name, and people just refer to it as Cat. So
just Cat.
So another platform, another one added to that guy. I've seen him somewhere, and that's where that guy concept came up. In fact, people I work with say, you just keep popping up everywhere. So, yeah.
So getting into the musical part of your life, what were your initial inspirations to get started? How did you end up getting into RSA, and what inspired you musically, both who and what kinds of music?
Yeah, sure. I think when you're growing up in Samoa at the time, UB40 was a huge influence on, on our upbringing and growing up, particularly in the islands. And I guess that's why they're so big in the Pacific. And so they played a huge part in my music taste growing up, alongside Kapena. And I think I grew up, and RSA grew up together with Kapena in some way. And so they were like the comparison of the Pacific Island feel in reggae that we tried to portray. Interestingly enough, everywhere you'd go, you'd hear RSA following that particular album, Volume 4. And it was the same sort of status that we had received for UB40, or seen UB40 being played everywhere, on the buses, in the taxis, in the restaurants. I had a surgery shortly after the album was released, and even the surgeons were listening to RSA in the theater. And I'm like, please, if I were to go out, please do not let it be going out listening to RSA band. But that's how popular it was, you know,
Yeah.
and never ever expected it to be that big. And there's a story behind it, because the first three RSA albums, 1, 2, and 3, were all Palangi covers. And that's the way Pacific Island bands were heading towards. And so when our management said, let's do a Samoan album, I'm like, who does that? I was so hesitant and resistant to the concept and the idea that I talked to my dad and I said, our boss wanted us to do a Samoan album. He goes, that's great. I'm like, what? And so 8 weeks of recording on Sundays after a whole week of gigging. Sometimes we had no voice, but just gave it our best. 8 weeks, 8 Sundays. We released that album, and boom, never even knew how well received it was gonna be. And that, I think, I can confidently say, that turned around a lot of Samoan bands based, locally and abroad, to turn back to Samoan music from that album. And I kid you not. And then it just changed the way bands, I suppose, were tracking at that point in time. And then lots of other Samoan bands started bringing out Samoan music. Yeah, but it was, we never expected it to be as big as it turned out to be.
RSA wasn't your first experience with a Samoan band?
No. In fact, we were still in Samoa College, a good bunch of us, and the Mount Via band had broken out. This was probably 2 or 3 years before we formed the RSA band. And Cindy of Samoa left massive shoes for us to fill. And we were in 3rd and 4th form. And because one of the boys is related to the band leader of Mount Via at the time, they said, well, our band broke up last weekend and you guys are it. And so kind of like put together in the week leading up to the weekend. And by that weekend, we were playing and we were supposed to be the Mount Via band. And there was a perception in Samoa, you're not a real musician unless you've come through Mount Via.
Oh.
That's how you earn your stripes. That's how you know you've made it big in Samoa, as you've gone through Mount Via band, because Mount Via club at the time was massive. It was the place most musicians wanted to play at because they were so popular, they were so big, and they were packing the house on Fridays and Saturdays. And mind you, at that time, nightclubs opened from Monday to Saturday, and so we would go to school. We would go to band practice after school, and then we'll play by nighttime and finish at 12 a.m. and then back to school the next day. So we'd often see our teachers come up to the club, and it had its benefits. Only in Samoa.
Yeah, only.
And so we broke away from Mount Via. The two of us, particularly myself and Hemi Mayaba Solomona Jr., and we went to RSA band, and it was a huge leap of faith, because Mount Via, as I said, was up there. No other band, no club could ever compare. And for the first time ever in the nightclub scene, the crowd sort of split. And then most of the boys that we were playing with at Mount Via at that time slowly trickled through. And that's how RSA band started to reach the status it gotten to.
Did having a club help?
Absolutely. And I think the attraction point was mainly because we were so young.
Yeah.
And I think we were kind of like Samoa's answer to Boyzone, because we were in our late teens, and at the height of RSA band, we were in our very early 20s. So we were really, really young.
You guys were also like one of the first bands to start doing what we call MTV Samoa, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. That Amayala Walofa song that I sing was probably, it was our first MTV, to be produced, and then followed by Mafa Fautasi, and then followed by a string of all our other hits. Once the Amayala Walofa one went pretty big. Yeah.
Yeah, to this day, my dad still watches them on YouTube. I have the
Um,
VHS somewhere.
yeah, sometimes it gets played on TV Samoa periodically, and then you'll know it because people will come and say, "Oh, yeah, your song came on TV last night." I'm like, "Oh my God, they're still playing that."
It's
Even
a
at my
classic.
Yeah, even here in New Zealand, I've been in New Zealand for a good maybe almost 20 years, if not 20, and people are like, "Oh, I saw this clip on YouTube, and it's you." I was like, "Yeah, sure." It still haunts me.
So moving on from the musical part, then you started to go on a weight loss journey, right? Was there a point in your life when you decided that you needed to focus on that?
Yeah, it's a whole bunch of small things that I kind of like just put in the back of my mind. I remember watching an interview with Dolly Parton, and she said, "I'm such a show person that I will nip, I will talk, I will do whatever, so that I look presentable because this is my product." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's interesting." I just set in the back of my mind, and I do a lot of gigs. And so part of it as well is all the health issues. Diabetes runs in my line of family, both sides. I've also had families who've passed away fairly young, including a cousin who died a first cousin of mine, who died at about 2021 at that age because he was so big. And my kids were growing up, and I'm like, I want to see my kids, marry off and have their own families and that sort of thing. In fact, that's what most Pacific Islanders write to me and tell me about, is that they want to be around for their kids longer, for longevity and that sort of thing, want to keep up with them and be around for them. And so those sorts of things were kind of like, yeah, banked up in the back of my mind, but I didn't know how to unpack it. And so I did a study on neurosemantics, and that's understanding the link between our thoughts and how it gives word to what we say, and then how it influences our actions. And then from that point, I was able to clearly identify what was holding me back. And I went through a process of elimination. What actions am I doing? What challenges am I facing? How am I dealing to it? Is it taking me towards my goal or away from it? So this is kind of like what I coach people on remotely, because we all have accumulated through our lives an understanding of what is good and what is bad. You don't need me to tell you, oh, cookies or chocolates or fizzies are bad for you, right? You know that. And eating green and eating clean is the way to go. But it's consistency over time. The challenge, though, is our thinking. That is what holds us back. We go off the grid by having something bad one time. That doesn't outweigh a whole 2 weeks or a whole month of eating well and eating clean. We just said, oh, I fell off the wagon. Might as well revert back to what's easy. And that's just the way we are now, right? And so that's why and how often people fall off and stay off. But it's like, if you fall off, get back on, continue. So I think my family, and this is a huge thing for Pacific Islanders, because we live so amongst extended families. We have fa'alaveravas, we have gatherings, we have funerals, and everything in our culture evolves around food. And so my wife played a huge part in my success in that journey, is that out of sight, out of mind. So when I'm at work, I didn't expect them to go on a diet. That was my journey. They would prepare what they normally would, just enough for themselves, put away what's left over, and my meals are prepared separately, in a different way: bake, grill, barbecue, steam. And that's what I'd come home to. I won't be tempted to see what they had for dinner. I would eat my own clean dinner. And that's how you're gonna have to deal with families and extended families. I tended to stay away from gatherings, or I would pack up my own clean meats and take it along with me to the barbecue. Yeah, they're kind of like, oh, okay. But they respected it. It's something that was personal to me, and I wanted to achieve. And you got to stand strong by that, if that makes sense. Yeah, and so through time, drop the weight, and I think that's really the change of lifestyle kind of like concept, and that's how you approach it to keep it off. Otherwise, you're just going to be yo-yoing back and forth.
I think with our Fa Samoa, there's a lot of foods that we've adopted that we feel are culturally Samoan, but they're actually introduced foods. Is there anything you think that we tend to like? There's a lot of people who say things like, if you don't eat this, you're not Samoan, whether it be pisupo or onions or anything like that. But there are things like you feel like we connect with being culturally Samoan, but are really detrimental to our health.
Oh, absolutely. You just said one of them, bisupo. And that's brought in by, colonization. The
Mm.
same with all the Chinese foods that we think are Samoan food from the migration of Chinese. My ancestors, because my great grandfather is 100% Chinese, and so all these have sort of like been adopted as Samoan Chinese cultured foods. Like the German buns, big fuyongs, the chop suey, even. That's Samoan Chinese. That's Chinese, and we have adopted it as our Samoan food, but it's not. And so that's not traditionally or culturally Samoan, I think, because when you go out back, I don't think you see many overweight people out in the villages. And I think the cleaner, the fresher, and the closest off the ground you get it, and from the sea, is primarily, that in its healthiest form. And I think that's why we have a lot of elders in the back villages living up to close to 100 and plus, because they eat so naturally good. And so it's almost like we need to take it back to the basics.
Yeah. And then portion size as well. I think that's one of the things about Fala Bilawi is we tend to get into these situations where we're bombarded by not just food, but we're bombarded by sound and music, and there's things going on completely bombarding us all the time, and we tend to just do things without thinking, eat without thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there are falavelavas, and so you have your food there, and then you have the people packing the back of your car with more food to take away,
Right.
take home. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
So then you took it to the ultimate extreme by going not just from somebody who lost weight, but also competing in bodybuilding competitions.
Yeah. So when I dropped the weight,
Uh-huh.
it took me 8 months to drop from 147.5 down to 96. But when you're a tall Pacific Island man and have lost that amount of weight within an 8-month period, people around you start getting worried. My boss's boss, my boss, my mom, my wife was saying, stop losing weight. And then other extended families were like, oi, maisi kama. Are you okay? Are you getting sick? And so I had to pull the brakes on dropping the weight. But that alone had accumulated a lot of, or inspired a lot of people, starting to get messages about how you doing, and you look absolutely fantastic. I need some help. And then I thought, how can I take it to next level?
Right.
And so in that was the journey to competing or getting into bodybuilding. In fact, I thought I was far from being ready. I started to bulk up, and I feel there was a difference of being, overweight and then being bulked in the weight training part of it. And then I met a New Zealand pro athlete, and she said to me, hey, you got good foundation. Would you ever consider getting on stage? And I said, yeah, that's kind of like where I want to get to in the next 5 years. She goes, well, there's a comp coming up under which federation escapes me at the moment. And I said, oh yeah, I'll be keen. She goes, I can coach you. And I said, oh yeah, thank you. Gladly welcomed. When is it? And she goes, it'll be in 4 months' time. I'm like, what? But I tell you what, that was my initiation into the science behind the food part of it. So Joe Stewart is this pro New Zealand bodybuilder that had helped me achieve that. And so, learned all about carbs, the protein intake, eating clean, and being able to vary and play with foods. And that really took me to the next stage. 3 months later, I was on stage. for my first competition, and 2 weeks after that was my second competition, and so on. So tick that one off. It's a very disciplined lifestyle, that is for sure. So if I thought losing weight and eating clean was one journey, that is like the next 2 or 3 steps. And anybody who's competed will probably attest to this as well. And so when people write to me and they go, I want to be that, and I said, let's cross one bridge first, and then we'll go from there. You know, of course, quite often, if you want to move from here to 3 or 4 steps ahead, you're only setting yourself up for failure. Because, you know, you got to take the baby steps before you learn how to run.
How did it feel, though, to get to that point? Like, once you got there and accomplished it, what did it feel like?
It felt great. Yeah, I never thought. In fact, my first moment of awe in my own attempts, blow my own trumpet, but was when I was in the tanning room. You know, we were all in these little things, anyways, that we had to wear. And I was standing amongst the boys in my class, and there was a total of 8 of us. So not only did I just do my first body building comp, I was landed in a class where there were 8 others. Anyways, you know, everyone was being tanned and, you know, doing their posing. And 2 of the younger guys in the younger class from my gym in my club were standing there nudging each other. And I was like, what are you little girls laughing about? And they were going, you just fit it right in. I said, wow, really? And here I am thinking I stand out. You know, what am I doing here? What am I even thinking? And so that was affirmation that, you know, I'd gotten to that level. And it felt really, really good. It felt good that it was more of a sense of achievement for myself, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm really happy for you. And I'm proud that you jumped.
Yeah. I mean, when you've been 147.5, never in a million years would you ever think that you would get there. So if myself now told myself then trying to lose that weight, that one day you would get here, I would never believe it.
I have a feeling you'd be able to answer this because we're in Hawaii and we use the pound system. How much is that in pounds? We're always confused by when people use the other system.
I think it's I have to pull up Google to search, but I think it's almost twice.
Oh, it's almost twice.
Yeah.
About 300,
yeah.
350 or 330 maybe. Yeah, that's about how much I am right now. So I'm definitely looking to you for inspiration to get going. And speaking of that, our next question is, what advice would you give to our Pacific Island brothers and sisters who feel that they've tried everything?
Stick with it long enough. It's as simple as that. You know, if you're putting in the hard yards, if you're eating clean, and if you're putting in the effort, it cannot not happen. And if you fall off, get back on and continue going. Some people don't stick with it long enough to see the results, and you will be the last person who would ever see the changes taking place. Why? Because you see yourself in the mirror. You know, you get out of the bathroom, you see yourself in the mirror. You are the person. And so it's very hard for you to get a gauge of the magic that is taking place. People around you will notice it first. People who haven't seen you in a while will notice it first. You will probably be the last person to see these changes taking place. Unless you take photos and compare it on a weekly basis. You take your measurements once a week, because it can be quite unflattering if you're weighing yourself too frequently in the week. Take a day, mark a time of that day once a week, get on the scales and get a gauge of how your progress is going. So
getting into the last part of our interview, so now we've transitioned. You've gone from being superstar RSA to bodybuilder and weight loss guru, and now we're over here to the next stage of your life. And obviously, you've been on TV. What was your television show again? The one that you did with, was that Pani and Pani?
Yes, that was Game of Bros.
Game of Bros, yes. And then you did Take Home Pay also with Tofinga and Vito.
Yeah, so there's a journey in that. Game of Bros started it all. So a couple of people associated to the program had written to me and said, you should do this. You have a story, and that would be a really good platform to, share it. You stand for obesity, you stand for weight loss, and that sort of thing. And I said, from what I recall, programs like no disrespect to these programs,
Yeah.
like Mr. Palava and all those are for younger guys. It's almost like a beauty for men, but younger men. I'm like in my 40s. And so they go, no, you'll be fantastic. And I'm like, nah, not for me. And so I had a chat to my daughter. My daughter has always been like my sounding board for these sorts of opportunities. And she goes, do it, Dad, do it. Oh my gosh. She goes, but one condition. I go, what? She goes, don't go out on the first episode. Nobody goes out on the first episode. Anyways, I gave it my all. I asked the guys around me and go, how do you? I was literally old enough to be their dad. There were the majority of them, not all, were about half my age. Anyways, I came home and my daughter goes, how did it go? And then she saw the look on my face. She goes, oh no, you went out. You got eliminated. Anyways, we all watched the screening, and she was absolutely proud. And I think they did my exit fantastically well, more than what I could expect, because they gave me a sort of like an exit speech or spiel of 10 seconds, which is more than what I'd hoped to achieve. And so for the reasons I had done that program, mission accomplished. It was really to inspire older Pacific Island men, because we have this concept, once you're married, you just let go. Big is beautiful, big is being happy, and that sort of thing. And that's how we get stuck in the ways that we are, in terms of our lifestyle. So I did that to inspire older Pacific Island men. And so people associated with that program are the same brother and sister who have filmed and produced Three Wise Cousins, Hibiscus and Ruthless, Take Home Pay, and then there was a Christmas one that they had done just last year. Mm-hmm. So from forming those networks, they said, oh, we're doing our second film, which is Hibiscus and Ruthless, and there's a part we'd like to propose and see if you're interested in. And that was the, I don't know if you've seen that movie, that was the wedding dance Magic Mind Group. So I'm in that dance scene, and I'm on the far left. And so with that, the next movie was Take On Pay. They go, hey, we have this, but it all stemmed back to RSA as well. They go, we didn't know that you were the guy from RSA band. We didn't know that you could sing, from all the projects we've worked on, and then they go, we have this part concerning a Norman who's a bar manager. He's been drinking a bit. And then, Tofina stumbles in. They were looking for somebody, and they get into an altercation. But really, the altercation is going to be a sing-off. You might want to watch this YouTube clip of that high note challenge. I'm like, high note challenge? Oh my gosh. Mm. Anyways, so even though they had me in mind for this part, they still wanted some assurance. They go, can you just send us a quick video of you doing the high note challenge and take it as high as you could? I'm like, oh my gosh. And so after the gym one day, I was sitting in the gym car looking around if there's anybody. And I just did I think it was a minute or two clip of the high note challenge, and I sent it to them. Cracked up. They go, okay, we'll see you at the rehearsals. And so we had one rehearsal session, and then the actual filming, which took the whole day to film that one scene, in the bar, from the beginning when they walked in to when it finished. So yeah, it was a great experience. Absolutely loved it, and it'll stay with me for life.
Was that your first time meeting Tofina?
Yes, though I think we may have seen each other in terms of online connections, because he seemed to know of me as well. When we first met at the rehearsals, we had a script rehearsal, which was about a couple of hours, and then we had the actual shoot. But you know how you kind of like know people from what they do, whether it's online, through posters, clips online, and that sort of thing. So I think we had that sense of familiarity, but not actually met. yeah, until then.
How was he to work with?
Excuse me. Absolutely fantastic. And I think that's why it took a whole day to film that bar scene. I've never heard so many different versions of that song. And so we would break character so often throughout the whole day, you know, do funny little things, go off script, change the lyrics to the song. And, you know, it's just, yeah, loads and loads of laughters. Yeah. So
I love
but
the way, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
what I really did appreciate about him, and I thanked him for it, is it was an honor to have been in his limelight. And you know, my daughter's a big fan of you know, Tofina as the Naked Samoans, and so I asked him if can we just take a selfie? I'll just send it to my daughter, and so yeah, it was amazing, and he was an awesome guy.
Yeah, I love the way he played up the not being able to speak Samoan too well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so there's a lot of those one-liners, you know,
yeah,
that didn't quite make the actual movie that caused us to laugh hilariously, you know, behind the scenes. I only wish that they would release much more of behind the scenes because there was just so many funny moments. Yeah,
that is awesome. So we've obviously come a long way so far, but there's just so much that you're currently doing now, obviously with your mentoring people and doing the online thing. And I'm sure you're doing a lot more also with the TV and movie career. So what can we expect next from you? What can we expect next from Paul?
I kind of like want to leave it to, oh, there he goes again. He pops up here and there. But, you know, these opportunities somehow find me, and some I do pursue. But I guess the only thing I have solidly planned at this stage is to spend as much time as I can with my grandson. When I take him to the park, people are like, grandson? I go, yeah. So I want to be there for the early part of his life as much as I possibly can. I've just started a new role, and it's with a New Zealand software company. And so we specialize in the software that DJs use and music makers and producers. And that, of course, will probably tap into my musical side. So I'm hoping to be able to, you know, do lots of production and recording in that sense, and mastering some of that part of my life. And I also am considering jumping on stage one last time for the road during my 50th. On my 50th, which is about 4 years away. Yeah, so that's an immediate plan or in the pipeline at the moment. But in terms of the movie wise, it's still kind of gray at this stage, but you never know what's going to come up.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's next for that guy. Obviously, it's not going to be something we don't expect. But I'm really, really grateful for you giving us this time today. It was last spur of the minute, and this is really my first opportunity interviewing somebody of your status. So I'm really, really grateful for you. And I'm blown away by what a relatable person you are, and just what a great person you are, and especially your story. And I hope I can take some of the lessons that you've got and put them into my life. And one day, you know, write you back and say, hey, man, you helped me so much with my life and helped me to help others. And all of our Samoan community over here in Hawaii, you know, maybe you don't know it, but we've all heard of you. We've all listened to you, and you've inspired us in one way or another. Thank you. Thank you so much. That guy.
The honor and pleasure is all mine. If you know, these sorts of opportunities does plant a seed that will challenge and change somebody's life, you know, that's what I'm all about, and that's all that I could hope for. And it's an honor and pleasure, you know, to have spent this time with you. May it change some lives.
I think it's really cool, like just how we talk like this, and then the inspirations that come to you are people like Dolly Parton and UB40. They probably have no idea on the things that they've done that have, and you probably have no idea how you've touched so many Samoan people. Also, I wanted Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Because, you know, sometimes when I'm finding it hard in the gym to train, I'm like, why am I even doing this? And then I'd meet somebody to go, hey, bro, you know, you're the reason why I'm here. I go, what do you mean? They go, I used to be 30 kgs heavier, but I'd seen your story on Coconut TV. I'd seen your interview, and that inspired me so much that I decided to just do something about it. So here I am. Thank you. I'm like, wow, put on some more weights. Here I go. And then I remember, you know, it's not just about me anymore. It's about people that, you know, look up to me. And so here I am, still going.
I wanted to say one last thing before we wrap up. So in my series of interviews that I've been doing, I did start with professional wrestlers. And the theme to those interviews was that a lot of the Samoans who had contributed to that side of our people had passed away. So a lot of these folks left legacies, but they didn't have a chance to really give a message to their legacy. What I wanted to do was to capture with the interviews that I did a message, something that just says to, you know, your family, your children and your grandchildren, you know, if they ever want to look back and see something, a special message for them. Do you have anything that you'd like to say to your kids and your grandkids, your family?
I think if it's one thing that I would leave behind is follow your dreams and don't let anyone tell you that nothing is impossible. Because if I told myself it was possible for what I've achieved today, I'd never believe it myself.
All right, once again, everybody, thank you. Once again, that guy, Paul Kuoi, thank you so much for the interview. Peace out. You have a great day, man.